The show opens as Jong-ju, the CEO of Jushi Group of Industries, arrives at a bustling bar in Beijing. He's a regular customer and often spends the whole night alone. Currently, a beautiful young woman, Su Qing, notices him from across the bar. She's plotting ways to meet the rich man coincidentally. She believes that making him fall in love with her is the only way out of her boring life. To execute her plan, Su Qing has hired a paid actor who will act drunk and harass her. On the other hand, Jong-ju pretends to be busy drinking, but his gaze never leaves our heroine. He assumes that she doesn't know his real identity. When he notices a drunk man behaving inappropriately with her, he promptly intervenes, just as she planned. The two then engage in a brief conversation, and she asks him to accompany her to her hotel room. Once the two are alone, she falls on the bed and pulls him on top of herself. The two are clearly attracted to each other, but Jong-ju puts on the brakes and stops kissing her. Su Qing then falls asleep on the bed, and because there's no other place to sleep, he spends the night in the bathtub. The following morning when they wake up, Su Qing acts like she doesn't remember anything from last night. She instead gets dressed and offers to pay him for the hotel room. But Jong-ju refuses to accept the money, saying the only thing he wants is her, revealing that he actually knows her. The two then have a brief romantic moment before she pushes him away and leaves the room. Jong-ju is sad to see her go, but discovers that she has dropped her ID card on the couch. Unbeknownst to him, the cunning woman intentionally left her card so he could follow her. Later that day, Su Qing returns home where her father, Zhang Fong, and half-sister Sulian are about to have lunch with Su Qing's boyfriend, Mr. Gu. He's a high-ranking official in the Jushi Industries, which makes him one of the most eligible bachelors in the city. As soon as Su Qing sits down, her stepsister asks where she's been all night, questioning her character and basically calling her a cheap whore. Clearly, the two don't have the best relationship. In retaliation, Su Qing confronts her stepsister by exposing intimate photos of her with Mr. Gu, who are having an affair. Despite the damning evidence, her boyfriend refuses to admit anything and tries to gaslight her by accusing her of violating his privacy. He then refuses to have lunch with the family and storms off. To make matters worse, Dad also dismisses the picture and sides with Mr. Gu. He still wants Su Qing to marry Mr. Gu because he's rich and well settled. This clearly hits a nerve with her, and she angrily shouts that she will never follow in his footsteps. It's then revealed that after the death of her mother, her dad married a rich woman who worked at Jushi Industries. Elsewhere, Jong-ju is listening to the drama unfold through a buggy slipped into Su Qing's purse, and he's pissed at the horrible treatment she receives from her own family. Then, in a flashback scene, a kidnapper binds a boy with chains and punishes him brutally. He warns him not to speak a word while he's away. After the criminal leaves, a young girl sneaks in and frees him. She consoles him and promises to protect him from the evil man. The boy and girl are none other than Jong-ju and Su Qing. While our heroine has forgotten the incident, he still remembers it and has vowed to repay her for saving him. Elsewhere, Su Qing is heartbroken by her dad's betrayal. She's so fed up with her family that she decides to cut ties with them and go no contact. Later, as she's walking down the road with her luggage, someone calls out her name. It's Jong-ju, who found her address through her ID card. However, she plays dumb and asks him to return her card. Our hero cleverly says that he left it in his car and offers to drop her off. When Su Qing gets into the car, she can't help but wonder why a rich CEO drives such a piece of shit car. She then asks for her ID card so she can be on her way. Jong-ju then says that he forgot it at home. With nowhere else to go, Su Qing reluctantly agrees to go to his house to fetch her card. However, instead of taking her to his real home, he takes her to a modest cottage, claiming he's an electrician. He also tries to distract from the ID card, but she shuts down his attempts to have a conversation. Eventually, Jong-ju has no choice but to hand over her ID card. Su Qing then takes her belongings and prepares to leave, but he stops her and abruptly says that he wants to take her away from her horrible family. Hearing this, our heroine is left completely stunned and wonders how he knows about her personal life. Regardless, she sees it as the perfect opportunity to get away from her family and achieve her initial goal of getting close to the CEO of Jushi Industries. Following this, they make a verbal agreement to stay together platonically. Our hero eagerly agrees because all he wants is to be close to her. However, things get off to a rocky start. Although he claims to be a professional electrician, a sudden power outage in the house almost exposes the CEO when he can't locate the fuse box. Su Qing knows that he's the CEO of Jushi, but she plays along with his facade. She ultimately discovers the frazzled wire and asks him to go to the nearest shop to get a replacement. He goes, and as soon as he reaches the store, he grabs a book on appliance repairs to learn more about electricity. After returning home, he gets to work and finally manages to fix the fuse. But Su-ching looks at him suspiciously, demanding that he tell the truth. When she keeps on shouting, our hero is reminded of the incident from his past when he was kidnapped and abused as a kid. This makes him feel very uneasy, and his stomach churns. Desperate, he ignores her questions and rushes to the pharmacy. The following morning, Su-ching awakens to find Jong-ju beside her. Feeling incredibly vulnerable, she tries to ask him something, but he suddenly approaches her and kisses her. Our heroine melts and lets go of her inhibitions. But just then, the alarm clock startles her awake. Later, as the two have breakfast together, Su-ching asks Jong-ju if he plans on getting a different job. He lies and says that he has an interview later that day. When she insists on accompanying him to the interview, he concocts a half-baked plan. He calls his assistant and asks him to fake a job interview. However, during the fake interview, his assistant goes overboard and heaps loads of praise on Jong-ju, making a mess of the interview. This forces our hero to end the call abruptly before his cover is blown. To downplay the incident, he asks Su-ching if she has a dream job. In response, she says she wants to work for the Jushi Corporation, praising the company's new CEO. A few days later, Su-ching sets a trap for her ex-boyfriend Mr. Gu and her stepsister Sulian. She sends them separate packages in each other's names and arranges a steamy meeting in a hotel room. Later that day, the two fall for her trap and arrive at the hotel room unaware that it's a setup. They quickly jump into bed and start getting intimate. Just then, Su-ching arrives in the room with a lot of her friends. Taken aback, they go off on him, calling him a man-whore. Unable to defend themselves, Sulian attacks her stepsister, resulting in an all-out brawl. When Su-ching returns home that night, Jong-ju sees the bruises on her cheeks and assumes Mr. Gu did it. Furious, he goes to him and offers 30% of his company's shares to leave Su-ching. The greedy Mr. Gu eagerly accepts, but just then a board member, Jianji, interrupts their conversation and shuts it down. Following this, we're given a brief history of Jushi Industries. It was founded by Chairman Lee, who took the company to incredible heights, earning huge profits. After his death, the company's reins were distributed between his second wife, Bai, and his son from his first wife, Jong-ju. Currently, there's a tussle between these two factions, and while Bai has several friends of her own, including Mr. Gu, Jong-ju only has Jianji on his side. Meanwhile, the video of Mr. Gu's indiscretions with Sulian hit the internet. Such a scandal can easily damage the entire company's reputation in a traditional society like China. Therefore, an urgent board meeting is held to address the situation. Jianji confronts him for stooping so low, but he refuses to admit any wrongdoing, claiming the video has been doctored. He then proposes to bring his girlfriend Su-ching to the company party to prove that he is faithful to her. Later that day, Zhongfang approaches his daughter Su-ching and asks for her help. He reveals that Mr. Gu has threatened to stop doing business with him if she doesn't support and validate him at the company banquet. Obsessed with money and power, the old man even threatens to jump off a bridge if she doesn't agree to help him. Our heroine is livid, but she feels she has no other choice but to agree. In the next scene, Mr. Gu and Su-ching enter the company banquet together. When Jong-ju notices her, he immediately grabs a plant to cover his face, fearing she will see him. Following this, Su-ching tries to brush off Mr. Gu's alleged affair to the host of shareholders gathered at the party. She praises the man she loves and gushes over how much he cares for her. Slightly embarrassed, Gu sees she's going a bit overboard and leans in to get her to knock it off. Unbeknownst to him, Su-ching is actually confessing her love to Jong-ju. In a shocking twist, she turns towards him and boldly announces that the two are in a relationship. Bai is furious and accuses our heroine of tarnishing the company's reputation. Soon, the entire crowd joins her, and they demand that security escort Su-ching out. But before they can do so, Jong-ju steps forward and kisses her, stunning everyone. Next, he exposes Mr. Gu's scandalous affairs with several women in the office. Turns out, not only is he a cheating piece of shit, he's also funneling company funds to do so. Overwhelmed by guilt, Mr. Gu passes out and is rushed to the hospital. Back at home, Su-ching is so upset that Jong-ju lied to her that she blurts out that she only confessed to loving him so that her father would stop forcing her to marry Gu. In a flashback scene, a young Su-ching returns home from school when she suddenly hears loud noises from a nearby warehouse. She peeks in and sees a shocking scene. A man is abusing a boy that is tied to a pole. She doesn't know that the kid is Jong-ju, as he remains silent. However, she manages to sneak in and save him. Present day, Jong-ju wants to take their relationship to the next level. He sets up a romantic scene at home and plans to propose. As soon as Su-ching enters the room, he confesses his feelings to her. He claims that he fell in love with her the first time they met. She then steps forward and responds with a passionate kiss. Our heroine says yes, but she is only doing so to infiltrate Jushi Industries. She wants to investigate the car accident that killed her mother, believing that the Jushi group is somehow responsible. In the next scene, the couple has a small wedding, and they preserve the moment with a fancy photo shoot. When Su-ching wakes the next morning, Jong-ju has prepared breakfast for her and left for work. She then reads while eating alone. Just then, a construction engineer arrives and asks if any improvements are needed on the property. During their conversation, Su-ching learns that the house was specially designed by Jong-ju himself. When the engineer lays out the blueprint, she is stunned. She realizes that the silent little boy she tried to rescue was Jong-ju. When both of them were captured and bound in chains, she made a drawing of her dream house, and our hero turned that vision into a reality. After hours of captivity, the kids eventually managed to escape, but the kidnappers chased them through the streets. Su-ching's mother spotted them near the house and tried to help, but she got into a terrible accident that resulted in her untimely demise. In the present, Su-ching has decided to join the Jushi group as a secretary. Jong-ju recommends her for the position, and the board members quickly agree. Currently, she's going through several news articles related to a company named Pangun Industries. Apparently, they have bypassed quality control in order to maximize profits. Jong-ju, who's overseeing her work, sees this and takes an interest in the news. Later in a board meeting, it's revealed that the Jushi group had invested in Pangun Industries and several other shady businesses on Bai's request. Jong-ju then exposes the risk of cooperation with such companies. Faced with the facts, the board unilaterally announces withdrawing their affiliation with such sketchy companies. A few days later, Su-ching becomes her husband's personal secretary, and everyone starts treating her differently. One day, Mr. Gu approaches her and says that as long as Jeonji is around, her days at the group will be difficult. Jeonji dated Jong-ju for several years. His comment irritates Su-ching, but she manages to keep her cool. After work, when everyone has left for the day, Jeonji hacks into Su-ching's computer. There, she finds several statements dating back 15 years, even though Su-ching was asked to compile the data for the past quarter. This makes her suspicious, and she thinks that someone might have sent her to spy on the company. Meanwhile, Su-ching sneaks into Jong-ju's room to access his computer, looking for information regarding the car accident that killed her mother. She soon comes across a monetary transaction from Jong-ju's father's account to her dad's account 15 years ago. This piqued her curiosity because she can't imagine why this transaction occurred. We're then taken to a flashback where the truth about the car accident is finally revealed. On that fateful day, it was Bai who was driving the car that ended up taking the poor woman's life. As penance, she married Su-ching's father and paid him a hefty sum of money. The greedy dad hid this from his family for the first few years, but one evening while drunk, he confessed everything to a picture of his late wife. Unbeknownst to him, his daughter heard everything. In the present, Jong-ju holds a crucial meeting with a senior shareholder of the company. He wants to talk about one of their products, a ceramic teapot. He points out that they don't have a patent for the product, which will allow other companies to knock off their design and sell it for cheap, jeopardizing their company's integrity. Meanwhile, Su-ching goes to a bar with her best friend and gets wasted. She begins to complain about how Jeonji knows her husband too well. Her friend advises her to stay close to Jong-ju because they could lose everything if they can't uncover the truth about the car accident. When Jong-ju returns home that night, Su-ching is nowhere to be found. He then hears someone yelling outside, and it turns out to be his wife, who's had a little too much to drink. Once they're inside, Su-ching calls him an idiot. She admits that she hates Jeonji and is done with her behavior. Hearing this, our hero finally realizes why his wife has been acting so grumpy. So he hugs her and promises that she's the only woman he loves. The following day, a new problem arises at work. The company's ceramic teapot concept has indeed been stolen and cheaply copied by another company and sold at a lower price, which has resulted in the Jushi group facing several complaints and refund requests. Later, Jeonji reveals that it's Zhang Feng's company that is making the knockoffs, with the sole intention of harming the Jushi group. She then encourages Jong-ju to make the right decision and heads out. Following this, Jeonji gives Su-ching a file and asks her to inventory the number of teapots in the storeroom. Upon seeing the file, she realizes that the inventory was actually from her father's company. Nonetheless, she does what she's asked and counts the inventory. Later that day, Jong-ju receives a call saying that there's a problem and an emergency board meeting has been called. The batch of teapots that Su-ching had inventoried earlier were found to be cheap knockoffs. Because she is Zhang Feng's eldest daughter, everyone blames her for the debacle. Elsewhere, Jeonji accuses Bai of collaborating with her husband to make a quick profit. But the cunning old woman reveals that a prenuptial agreement states that she must give Zhongfang half of what she owns. Clearly, it doesn't make sense for her to sell fake products and harm her primary source of income. Annoyed that she can't find any evidence, Jianji decides to go after Su Qing. She believes that the CEO's new wife may have ulterior motives. She then goes to the same bar where the couple met for the first time and obtains the video surveillance. The video clearly shows how Su Qing planned the entire meeting by paying off a random guy. Jianji then downloads the video to a flash drive and hands it to Zhang Ju. Unbeknownst to her, the CEO is in on the whole thing, but doesn't want to expose his wife. He takes the flash drive and crushes it into pieces. After this, he tells her to go home, while he handles the matter. Su Qing goes back to her old house to see her father. Turns out the Jushi Group is now suing Zhongfang because of the teapot incident. He again turns to his neglected daughter in his time of trouble. During their conversation, Su Qing admits that she married Zhang Ju just to infiltrate the Jushi Group and uncover the truth about her mother's death. Once she returns home, she and her husband sit down to have an honest conversation. Su Qing takes off her wedding ring and says that she understands if he feels betrayed and wants a divorce. However, he refuses to believe that she doesn't love him and abruptly ends their conversation. In the middle of the night, Su Qing secretly returns to grab her marriage certificate from the drawer. But just then, our hero arrives and notices the marriage certificate and divorce papers in her hand. This infuriates him, and he ends up tearing up the papers. At this moment, she reveals that she hired a lawyer for her dad and intends to fight the lawsuit. Zhang Ju warns that she has no chance of winning, but she remains steadfast. This leaves our hero with a moral dilemma. On one hand, he doesn't want his company to suffer losses, but on the other hand, he can't watch his wife's reputation become tarnished. So the next day, in front of the board members, he unexpectedly supports Zhongfang. This infuriates Jianji, so she plans to transfer his shares to her name. In a flashback, we learn that Bai had pursued the recently widowed Li, chairman of the Jushi Group. However, their marriage was transactional and lacked love, so she had an affair with Zhongfang and got pregnant with their first daughter, Sulian. This conniving bitch decided to use her daughter to secure her position in the Jushi Group. However, Chairman Li learned of the affair and decided to adopt Jianji as his goddaughter. He wanted to make her the next heir of the company. On adoption day, Bai was driving recklessly down the streets talking to her husband. Unfortunately, she hit Su Qing's mother and killed her instantly. Bai then married Zhongfang so he wouldn't press criminal charges. A few years later, Chairman Li discovered that he had a biological son from his first wife, and that son was none other than Zhang Ju. In the present, Su Qing has finally found a lawyer and plans to meet with him in person for a detailed conversation. However, she's soon joined by her father, who thanks her for getting the Jushi Group to withdraw the lawsuit. Hearing this, she realizes that her husband has risked his job by withdrawing the lawsuit. Later, the two meet at the cottage and have a serious conversation. Su Qing calls him naive for risking his job to save her ungrateful father. However, Zhang Ju responds that he will always be by her side no matter what, as he still holds himself responsible for her mother's death, as the poor lady was only trying to help him. From that day onwards, he promised to take care of Su Qing. Moved by his words, our heroine becomes emotional, and they finally reconcile with a passionate kiss. Later that day, she meets with Mr. Gu, who reveals he wants to sell his shares to pay off his gambling debt. Su Qing senses that something is off, so she relays the information to her husband that afternoon. After a brief discussion, Zhang Ju buys Mr. Gu's shares in the group, making him a majority shareholder. Suspecting foul play, Zhang Ju deliberately leaves a mistake when he signs the contract. Next, as part of an elaborate plan to trap the young CEO, Bai organizes a board meeting. Initially, Zhang Ju resolved the issues by exchanging the counterfeit teapots for new original ones. However, Bai had secretly moved another batch of counterfeit products into the company's inventory. She accuses him of doing so and threatens to expose scandals involving the Jushi Group and the Ye family. Mr. Gu then presents the same contract from earlier, which contains our hero's signature and seal. He claims that it's evidence of an illegal deal between the CEO and Zhongfang. At this moment, it's revealed that the entire teapot incident was masterminded by Bai. But just when it seems that Zhang Ju has fallen into her trap, Su Qing bursts into the board meeting. She brings forward a contract to compare the seal markings and signature. Weeks ago, when Su Qing had entered the CEO's office, she had accidentally dropped a seal on the floor, causing a small dent in the seal. However, the seal on this new contract looks perfectly intact, and the signature on the contract is inconsistent with Zhang Ju's. With this mountain of evidence, it becomes clear that Bai and Mr. Gu orchestrated the entire fiasco. Now that they're finally exposed, they are unanimously kicked out of the company. In the final scene, Jong-ju drops one more bombshell. He had known about Jeonji's plans to acquire his shares, and thus willingly passes on the position of CEO to her. She's surprised by his gesture and wonders why he didn't call her out. Our hero replies that he doesn't care about position or power anymore. What matters to him is spending each day happily with the woman he loves, Su-ching.